Hello, coaches, and welcome to this edition of Give and Go Live. My name is David Newberry, and I'm joined by my colleague, Ian Barker. Hello, Ian.
Hello, coaches, and hello, David.
Ian, we've been looking at a series of activities for coaches working with young players, 6, 7, and 8-year-olds, and this activity is the fourth in that series, entitled Steal the Bacon. And we'll see from the first activity that we have 3 teams. Each team has 3 players, 3 yellows, 3 reds, and 3 blues, and each team has its own home base, an area that is marked with flat markers, approximately 3 yards each side, and forming a triangle in the corner of the square. There are a number of balls that are placed in the middle, a number that equates to the number of players plus a few extras, so that each player has a ball and a few extras to make up the target of getting in each area 3 balls in the corners. So as we can see in this diagram, the players have run out into the middle when their number is being called. They collect a ball, they dribble back 1 ball only, and then deposit it in the area by using the sole of their foot to stop the ball. And that's very important, that the ball must reside inside that area. Any ball that rolls out of that area cannot be collected by the teammates. They have to leave it alone. And if those players touch the ball, that ball is returned back to the middle. And the idea is to try and get 3 balls in the corner to win the game. And then the coach calls out a new player once the balls have been reset in the center, Ian.
So what I really like about this activity, especially for coaches working with the 6 and unders, 8 and unders, is you can take a game like Steal the Bacon and you can play it at a very fundamental level, the one we've got here, but you can keep the same setup, call it the same game, and add the complexity, as we'll see a little bit later. So the first thing is there's no direct competition. There's nobody trying to steal the ball or tackle you, and you don't have to shield from anybody. So that's an important start fundamentally. If the game condition says that we have to return the ball to this space and stop it in this space, the players will control the ball closely as a consequence of the game condition. They won't do it just because you tell them to, if they were dribbling just down the field, but because they've got to land it in a zone, you can rest assured they will try a little bit harder to dribble under control. You're probably going to get the verbal support of a couple of teammates to encourage them to go faster, which is great. And then absolutely here, after a few rounds and repetitions, I'm going to have the coach specify how the ball is returned. So when I come up to the ball, I've got to put the sole of my foot on it, and then I can turn back. Or when I get up to the ball, I'm going to chop it with the big toe and then chop it and come back the other way. So putting in those little specifications, I think, is really important. And maybe halfway back, you could ask them to do a small beat your opponent move, but they're doing it, of course, unchallenged, so they can practice some sort of wiggly little fake or feint.
And in the second sequence, Ian, we see a very similar setup, but this time you can see to the right-hand side, most of the balls have been removed to the point now where there are only 6 balls available, and there's 3 players trying to get 3 balls each. So what we're trying to do is create a situation where once the players have gone back and forth from the center, they have no more than 2 balls each. And that triggers the option now to go and steal a ball from an opponent's area. On the left-hand side, we see one of the red players has entered into the yellow player's home box. They've collected a ball and now, assuming that they're going to make their way back to their red area, the yellow player has decided to steal from the red's area. And as all that's happening, the player in blue has stolen a ball from the Reds area and made 3 in the box. So the blue player wins, Ian.
So again, pretty much a 1 versus 1 versus 1. So we can see the team delineation. We certainly have the opportunity now for 2 players to get into a combative situation. But because we have 6 balls, it's going to be a lot more carrying a ball individually, but now a little bit more tactics, because you've got to decide how you can keep your soccer balls in your grid, as the red player has been struggling with, but you've still got to go and steal. So you've got twin challenges here of offensive and defensive. Interestingly, too, depending on how you break up the teams, you might decide that this is the one of your stronger players on the red team, one of your stronger players on the yellow, one of your strongest on the blue. So they're teammates with intermediate and weaker players, and they're actually teammates, but they're working kind of independently of each other in terms of the actual technical activity. So you can have nice balanced teams here, and some of the more experienced older kids are actually in support of some of the new kids, less experienced kids. But I like this as an example of Steal the Bacon, which is definitely a progression from the previous version, but is still a relatively safe and friendly type environment.
And our final sequence now is a team activity with players combining passing and receiving. And the example here with the red team, a red team player has gone into the yellow team's box, stolen the ball, dribbled out a little bit, and then made a pass to an open teammate who's standing in their home base ready to control the ball. The yellow team has stolen the ball from the red box and has now needing some support because one of the blue players has decided to defend and prevent the yellow player dribbling back to their area easily. And so now one of the yellow players has come and provided some passing support. And as that's happening, again, the blue player has gone largely undetected, stolen the ball from the yellow's area and dribbled back in there. So a number of different ways to play this game. We got the blues that have decided to send a defender and one player dribbling, and the reds and the yellows have decided to work in combination and try and pass, but without defending the blue team. Ian.
So I love the complexity of this, and I think 8 and unders is the right age for sure. I think this would be a little bit much for some of the younger kids, perhaps. So one of the interesting things is, first of all, I would let this game play, and I would acknowledge that this red has stayed home. This blue has apparently stayed home or is now home, and yet both the yellows have vacated their base. So different approaches, and maybe all 6 players took their own individual approach, or maybe they were kind of working in coordination. What I would do is I would let this play out, let everybody have a go. Then I would review these choices, stay at home, or in the case of the yellows, vacate the space. And then I would say to the kids, you've got 30 seconds to huddle up and come up with a game strategy. And you'll actually start getting the kids talking to each other about how they're going to approach this. So one topic is, how do we defend our base? Another topic is, do we pass it back? That's the quickest, but it needs to have a receiver and it can be intercepted. Or do we dribble it back, which is a little bit slower, but is a much safer option because I can potentially protect the ball. So now you can start talking to the players about, are we going to work in tandem to steal and collect? Or are we going to work individually to steal and correct? Or are we going to work in some combination of both? So some really interesting fundamental tactics, aka decisions, in addition to all the technical applications. We're currently working with 6 balls, so there is a ball for every player. But if you took a couple of soccer balls out, now players have to work without the ball too, so they've got to work off the ball. And like everything that David has been presenting, and I think very appropriately, how do we make it less challenging if we've got a new group? How do we make it more challenging if the kids are starting to get a little bit underwhelmed by the challenge? And some of those things could be putting in prescribed moves. One of the ones David has not put in here would be remove some soccer balls, or maybe make the space tighter. Over here in the less challenging, put more soccer balls in. That could be definitely part of it. Make the space a little bit bigger so it's a little bit friendlier to kids. They're not under immediate pressure. I will say, though, manage the space, because if you make it too big, it becomes more about running backwards and forwards across the grid and less about getting balls and turning and competing. So I tend to play this in a pretty tight space if it's safe, because it's going to put more technical challenge in. If I make it way too big, then it's really just a lot of running needlessly, very often without the ball. So again, always manage your less challenge, more challenge on the basis of the kids that you've got and how they're particularly feeling that day, maybe.
Well, thank you, Ian, and thank you, coaches, for joining us. And if you're interested in any activities in a PDF or hardback form, we have a series of manuals that are available through this link on the United Soccer Coaches website. Thank you, coaches, and we look forward to seeing you on the next edition of Give and Go Live.